Hey guys, welcome back. My name is Michael McCarville. This is Fun with Fallen Flags. So what we're going to do this week is we're going to work on a kit that is as you can see, the Rio Grande Southern ore loading bin. This is basically a bin that the mine would fill up, and there would be cables that ran down into the bin, and then ore buckets would dump into the bin, and out the back would be cables that would secure that line onto into the ground or onto a large heavy item, so that the cables could remain tight going into this. So this bin is essentially an extension of the mine that's up in the hills somewhere. So let's take a look at the pieces. You know how they joke about some of these Craftsman kits are just a big box of sticks? This would be the epitome of the big box of sticks. This kit is basically all wood pieces, a single piece of instructions printed on one side, and then there's a couple of board and batten panels. Other than that, it is literally bundles of different sizes of dimensional lumber that we're going to use to create this thing. So it is a box of sticks. So let's get started. We're going to start out in weathering and staining the wood in a two-step process. First thing we're going to do, which is kind of counterintuitive, what I did on this kit is I did staining with India ink first, and then I stained the wood. A lot of times it's done differently. You do it in reverse order. So I wanted any of the sunken features of the wood or any of the marks that I had put on it, any of the scrapes and that type of thing, like I did with the legs. What you're looking at here is the India ink and isopropyl alcohol. 91% is what I use. I know you can get different concentrations of it, but this is just happened to be what I grabbed off the shelf. And then waterproof India ink, local craft store had this. So combine that, 9 parts of alcohol to 1 part India ink. So I mixed it up, and then I gave it a wash. Now what you see here is the wood after just the step of these two. We haven't stained the wood yet. All we've done is given it this darkened look. What it does is it changes the wood to more of like a driftwood, really old aged look. Now if you want to go with that look, then you're done. You don't need to do anything else. However, what I also did after that was I took this is raw umber oil, and thinned it with just some generic oil thinner, and then I washed the wood. And afterwards what you get is you get something that looks like this. Now it's already had the India ink and alcohol wash on it, and then I just did the same thing, and I didn't really measure the oil paint versus paint thinner consistency. I got it to look about the thickness of coffee, just enough to give the wood a colored stain. So it gets rid of that driftwood look, and it gives it kind of more of a brown. And what you see here is you see there's areas where it's a little lighter, where you can see driftwood, and areas where I got some of the wood to absorb the India ink even deeper. Some places I applied the India ink a little bit more, a little bit of a second coat, and you see a lot of variation in the wood, and the wood here looks great. So this is the wood that we're going to use for the feet, for the legs of the ore bin. So that's how I achieved the look for staining the wood and also weathering it. Now again, I did India ink first, and I did the wood stain, which is actually just oil paint, raw umber oil paint thinned in a wash over it, just enough to soak into the wood. So I did it reverse. If you do it the other way, I don't know what your results are going to be, but it's worth checking out. However, I just want to mention that's the order I did it, which is usually the opposite of what is normally done. Okay, so taking the components you saw in the last photo, we're going to build up the structure you see here. We're going to take the legs and with the top and bottom plates, glue those together. We're going to put cross members on them, one on each side of the leg, and essentially you have what you see here. Tie those three elements together with some beams that run across the top, glue that up, and that's going to be the support for the next piece of the ore bin. So let's talk about adhesives. So while I do use super glue on this project, I don't use it that much, and a lot of times if I need an instant connection on something, I'll glue it together, something that I don't know if the regular adhesive is going to hold for that long. So I use Titebond 3 glue, and the reason why I like this is because not only is it construction grade adhesive, so it's made for outdoor projects, actual in real life construction projects, it's also waterproof. So when this is done, if I sit it in an area that is going to get a lot of scenic glued areas that have water that sits, it's not going to deteriorate the structure. Or if I spray an area with woodland scenics, cement, water-based application of anything, it's not going to affect the model. So I do like it. Also, it's non-toxic too, so I don't have to worry about getting it on my hands or anything. So really good combination of features for that. So let's move on to the next piece of this construction. So step 3 is construction of the bin itself. It sits on top of the legs that we just finished. So the beams are stained, and we're going to glue those together. Since the drawing is done in HO scale, you can use it as a template. What I did is I taped the top piece down with a little bit of painter's tape and then just built directly on top of the template. I used a piece of glass on top of the paper so that I wouldn't get anything that would stick to the template, but other than that, I just built straight on top of the plans. I do that through pretty much the rest of the construction of the kit. Once the front wall of the bin is done, you can add the slats to the back side of it and build up the front wall of the bin. Just note that there is an opening there towards the bottom where the chute's going to be, so you're going to have to cut the pieces of material around that and leave that open. Initially I tried to put the slats all the way down and then go back and cut out the opening. That actually cost me a lot of time, so I would definitely not do that. In the future I would probably just cut the right dimensions on the side pieces separately and then apply those. When you do get to the bottom, you want to leave the bottom 1/8 of an inch because you're going to need that when the sloping back bottom of the bin attaches to the front wall. So leave the bottom 1/8 of an inch open. Back wall is much simpler, just straight boards, there's no chute on the back, and you can use the template again to line everything up the way that the front wall was done. At this point you pretty much glue the back and front walls down to the leg assembly. What you're going to want to do is line up each of the vertical bins with the horizontal supports on the bottom of the leg assembly, and then add 5 beams across the top. So you'll notice that the 2 outside beams are just the flush with the front and back. The 3 are going to overhang, and you're going to use that to add a platform across the front of the building. So there is different lengths on that. You want to make sure the backs are flush. When I was attaching the vertical to the horizontal pieces, I used those office supply paper clips, those big heavy duty ones, and I used that to line up so that each leg was lining up perfectly on the horizontal beam. So the back wall lined up perfectly when the bottom pieces were glued in, because you're going to get a little bit of wander on the beams. Just it's a good idea to clip those in place as they set. Okay, so this is where it gets interesting. So a lot of this now starts to build on itself. If you're really inaccurate in the very beginning of the build, then it's really going to hurt you here. So having everything trued up and square is really important. Just keep it going through the process. So you'll see there's a vertical member that goes in there's another vertical member that's perpendicular to that, a shorter one. That one goes in. You do those all the way across the bin, and then use some of the wood slat material, and then that builds up the base. And you can see why you've left a little bit of a gap at the bottom. It's because where the bin comes down, it's gonna hit that empty space, and it needs that for that last board to go into. Okay, so next step is pretty simple. Those three vertical supports that get smaller as they go up, you're putting those in. On the inside of that, you're going to build a wood panel. So they say that you need 16 pieces of paneling material, glue those together on end, and then what the intent is that you're going to cut a triangle out of one of those, out of the corner of that, and then the other corner you're going to cut another triangle for the other side. That's great, but your angle may not be exactly 45. It may be a little off. You maybe want to do a lot of measurements. What I recommend doing is I cut out a template out of cardboard that I could fit in there, and I knew it was dead on, and that was the shape that I needed. So once I got that made out of cardboard, I could just lay that down in the panel and then cut out the shape that I needed. And then you do the same for the other corner of the panel that you made, and then you get two triangles. And you may have a little bit of material left in the center, but you know that the outside corners are going to be perfectly square if you laid it up. So that's what I did. There is a little bit of trim pieces that you're going to put in of basically 1/16 by 1/16 inch material. Goes down the front, goes up the side. So if your gaps are off a little bit, that's okay, but this should get you pretty close. It's got me close enough where when I put the trim material in, any of my screw ups that I had were completely hidden, and the sides look great. And if you did a pretty good job, it'll look a lot like this. You'll get the panels on the inside, the boards are nice and straight, and there's a little bit of trim you can see now that goes up in a kind of a V shape, and that hides any of the errors that you might have made. So if it comes out looking anywhere close to this, then you've been very successful. Okay, so next up is the platform just above the ore bin itself. So you'll notice that I've weathered and stained the board and batten pieces. Now on the sides of where there's a doorway, you need to cut the doorway into the material. I use a nipper, and it's used for cutting out little square chunks, one little chunk at a time, to make that opening. I highly recommend you do that. If you don't have that, it's not a very expensive tool, but you know, you can just do it with a nice straight edge and a nice fresh blade. You'll get that same look. You'll also notice that the side panels have framing on them. So what we're going to do is we're going to add framing to those panels, so when we glue them in place and we look into the bin, we'll see framing on them. We're going to add slats across the back to simulate framing as well, and that's what the three pieces on the bottom of the photo, that's what they're going to attach to. The gaps in between are to simulate the cable lines as they come into the top of the ore bin where they would dump, and then the ore containers would actually go back up to the mine, but the openings are to give some place for the cables to go out the back of the ore bin and to anchor down into the ground somewhere. Alright, once you have the walls built, go ahead and glue those in place, clamp them in place. You'll notice that I've added roof members. There's going to be 3 on the back as well. Always try to line them up with any of the other members. So if you've got a vertical member in a wall and you've got a support, you don't want to put it in between those members. You always want to line it up with that vertical stud so that you get that type of support directly on top of the beam. So it's not really support for you, it's just that's how the actual building was constructed. Okay, so at this point the back wall's done, the panels have been attached to the boards on the back, the flooring on the inside, that's been added on the left or the right of the openings where the containers of ore would come into the structure and dump. And then we've started working on the platform out front. So there's a platform that sits out front. It's braced with vertical members, and then there's also supports on the inside. So the supports inside, there's one in the middle and there's one in the front. So essentially when the cables come into the structure, that's what they attach to, so that the ore buckets could come into the structure and then dump and then ride that cable back out. So they are actually used to attach the cable to the inside of the structure and then continue on out through the back. So this is a little bit better view of the walkway. So now we're starting the construction of the walkway outside the structure and the stairways that go down. So this walkway is built off of extensions that come off the beams. Add the panels, and then add the three diagonal supports that support it into the wall. So at the bottom, the diagonals actually get attached to a beam, so there will be a little bit of bend to them. So that's normal, that's per the template. So just kind of, if it looks funny, that's actually the intention of the construction for it. Next, we're going to put simple railing on the front, and then we're going to start working on the stairway that goes down around the outside. Do I have any hair left? I think I have some. I think I pulled most of it out though during this step. So I'm not sure about the sanity of this step, but taking the photocopy of this piece of paper for the stringers, we're supposed to glue it to cardboard, the bottom of the box. Not a good plan. And then we're going to cut it out so that we make these stringer sections. I've glued mine to basswood, which is an improvement. Anyway, after a couple hours of complete failure, I gave up. Local hobby shop stopped and picked up a laser stairway kit. So this kit actually makes 2 flights, and it came out to be pretty much perfect for what our needs were. So you can see the laser kit pieces. There. So not bad. Looks pretty good. For our needs, it's really what we need. So what we did was the doorway that comes out, the little mini, 6x6 foot deck, that's all scratch built, just added dimensional lumber that was pretty much out of the kit. Then the stairway going down to the landing and the stairway going all the way down to the ground, the second flight, those are parts of the kit. The landing is actually part of the template that you get in the upper left of the parts there. So you can take these 2 templates, and it's actually a construction jig, and you put the stringers in there, and then you glue all the pieces on. The treads have adhesive on the back, but I really needed to apply glue to it, so a little bit of ACC at each of those joints, and that thing is rock solid. The only thing that's not scratch built, or that's not a laser kit, is the scratch built legs underneath the landing there halfway down, and that is just 8x8s and 1x6s, and it just mirrors the construction of the legs of the actual ore bin itself. So that's what we have. That part is done, and we have one last section is just to build the chute in the front. So let's go take a quick look at that. Okay, so the step 5 is constructing the chute. Use the template for dimensions of the lumber, glue the pieces together on end, stand them up, put them in there. The center beam that runs across the tops of the legs, that was supposed to be trimmed in an earlier step, and at this point, if it's not, you might have to do some adjustments. Even if it is, you might have to do some adjustments. I actually had to carve mine down quite a bit. So when I got the fit right, then I went and stained the end a little bit so it wouldn't be seen, even though it's going to be pretty tough to be seen anyway. So step 5 is done, and let's take a look at our completed model now. Okay, this is the end result, the Rio Grande Southern ore loading bin, and you can see the differentiation of color on the sides, the planking especially, the India ink wash and the oil-based wash. Looks good. And it's ready to go on the layout. So I'll leave information in the description below for this YouTube video on how to join the Facebook group and how to subscribe to the YouTube channel that this is on if you haven't already. So I want to thank you guys for watching. This was a lot of fun. Even the stairs was fun, but I'm sure I'm glad the stairs are over. So until the next episode, I want to thank you guys for watching and have a great day.